Osiris.
We're mass communicating. Mass communicating. Mass communicating.
Welcome back to Touchdowns All Day. I am your host, Max Dawson, flying solo this week. Barber and Joey had a huge weekend in the studio. We've already talked about the 4 new songs that they worked on in May. Well, add 3 new bangers to the equation that they were working on over the weekend. John and Joey aren't the only ones who have been busy lately. Mark's been touring the country with his DJ Brownie project, playing with Star Kitchen. Magner has been in the lab working on his rig. More on that coming soon as I sit down with keyboard and bass tech Ben Travers in a future Touchdowns All Day episode. And Alan, I have absolutely no idea what he's doing, but I'm sure it involves lots of reps and lots of sets. 424-666-SIYD, number to call, the Touchdowns All Day hotline. You could also get us at TDADBaby on X, at Touchdowns All Day on Instagram. I'm at FY Maxwell on Instagram and X. John is at Barber Shreds. Reach out, drop us a line, let us know what you think of the podcast, and keep your covers of Biscuits material coming. We'd love to do a part 2 of our fan covers episode. If you haven't heard it yet, check out episode 65. With everything that's been going on with the Disco Biscuits in 2024, it sometimes can be hard to find time to talk about anything but the newest songs, the latest shows, the next festival. The Biscuits keep evolving, keep moving, never standing still, and rarely looking backward. But every once in a while, it is fun to take a little stroll down memory lane. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this episode, in launching a new segment entitled I Remember When. For the maiden voyage of this segment, I have invited on 2 illustrious guests, 2 individuals who were actively involved in the creation of the jamband community in the 1990s. Now, that's not to suggest that jam bands didn't exist before the 1990s, but this thing that we all are a part of, the Biscuits and all of us, this community gathered around the genre of music known as jam bands, it really coalesced and received a sort of formal definition in the 1990s. And our guests today were instrumental in that process, in codifying the genre, in giving it a place online to hang out, and also, as we'll hear tonight, creating real world spaces for fans of improvised music to gather and share their passion. So in a moment, I will be joined by Andy Gadiel and Ted Kartzman. Now, you might know Andy and Ted as the co-founders of a website called Jambase.com. But they have been involved in the jam band community since the mid to late 90s in a variety of ways. Ted has managed the Slip. Andy was the founder of Andy Gadiel's Fish page, which was one of the first websites where people went to find information about Fish and other jam bands in the late 90s. Andy and Ted have long histories with the Disco Biscuits. In Ted's case, stretching back to the UPenn days. Andy was one of the first people to champion the Biscuits on the internet through his website and actually worked closely with the band to establish their web presence, and has since gone on to lend his technical expertise to a lot of the stuff that the Biscuits have done, both as a band and as individuals, including Couch Tour and Touchdowns All Day. But here's something maybe you didn't know. And that is that in 1999, Andy and Ted had the crazy idea to book the Disco Biscuits to play in the tiny back room at a bar called A Live One in Chicago, Illinois. It's where Ted was working after college, and Ted and Andy are going to tell you not only the story of their involvement with the Disco Biscuits, but how they took this crazy dream and on about a 24 or 48 hour notice, put together one of the most legendary shows from the ultra legendary year of 1999. We all have our own Disco Biscuits stories, whether you were around in the late 90s or came on board in the Set Break Is Over era. And we at Touchdowns All Day would love to hear them. So if you have a favorite memory, a favorite Disco Biscuits experience, a show that you think deserves to be revisited, let us know. Reach out 424-666-SIYD or hit us on the socials. Give us the lowdown, and who knows, maybe you'll hear yourself on a future episode of Touchdowns All Day. Okay, before we get to our episode, I would be remiss if I didn't remind you that Biscoland is coming. Bisco.land for all ticketing, lineup, and scheduling information. The band has, as I mentioned, 7 new songs that they haven't debuted. We've already talked a lot about the new drum and bass song, In the End We Have Forever. But there are 6, count them, 6 other new songs waiting to be debuted. Will some, all, none be debuted at Biscoland? I don't know. You don't know. The only way to find out is to go. So please, buy your tickets, support the band, head up to Lafayette, New York for the 4th of July weekend and celebrate this great nation's birthday with your friends, the Disco Biscuits. All right, without any further ado, let's get to our interview with Ted Kartzman and Andy Gadiel. Ted, Andy, welcome to Touchdowns All Day.
Max, thank you.
Thank you, Max.
Let's start out at the beginning. Your involvement with jam band music and the jam band community goes back so far that it probably predates the widespread use of the word jam band. So I'd like to start out by asking both of you, what was your first exposure to the music and the scene that would eventually come to be grouped together under this umbrella of jam bands?
Well, Ted, you might predate me in your exposure, given your collegiate experience.
I did. I was around in college. Before college, I can remember having a babysitter in the 80s when my parents would go out who had this crazy skeleton and like roses and these patches on this jean jacket. And I was like, whoa, man, something's going on and I got to figure it out. And she told me like, there's a parking lot and there's all kinds of things, and it just sounded like a place that I wanted to go to that my parents didn't want me to go to. And I wanted to go there. And that was my first exposure. But then college, I was running around 1991. So this is a Disco Biscuits related thing. So Mark Brownstein was in my freshman dorm. We had the quadrangle over there at the University of Pennsylvania. And that was sort of how I knew them. My first exposure to Disco Biscuits was overhearing a Zex C practice on 41st Street. That's predating the whole thing. I would say that's like, those are some early exposure points. I mean, seeing the Dead it was even the 80s, 89, we went RFK and like, I mean, where are you going to go from there? You know what I mean? I was on the bus. I got, the saying.
The bus came by and you got on.
How about you, Andy?
My exposure was also the Grateful Dead in high school, played at the Rosemont Horizon, and I went with some friends and was exposed to this whole new world where my hacky sack skills finally came in handy in the parking lot. And the music, I knew Skeletons from the Vault, and they played Sugar Magnolia, so I felt like I knew what was going on. My brother really, Aaron, is a huge influence on my musical experience in broadening my horizons and turning me on to new types of music. I kind of went from like Billy Joel to The Dead and Fish, and sort of missed everything in between. My Disco Biscuits experience started when I was in college at Michigan State. And they came through, actually, it was right after college. I was volunteering at a music festival called the Summer Sun Music Festival in the summer of '98. And the Biscuits were booked to play like 4 shows. And the idea of the festival was kind of a traveling circus festival where it was national headliners and local bands, and the Biscuits were on the rise. And the promoter of the festival had this idea to create a magazine about the bands playing the festival as a way to promote it. And the centerfold of the magazine was a poster that people could rip out and put up on their wall that promoted the festival. And he had this idea of interviewing and creating a magazine about the bands, and sort of turned into this idea of creating a magazine about the scene. And he asked me to help with it. And so I started calling people to ask if they wanted to advertise, or if they wanted to, just to kind of get the idea flowing. And my exposure to the term jam bands came when I talked to Dean Budnick for the first time, who was writing a book called The Name Jam Bands. And he was looking for a way to promote the book and a website for the book. And so we registered jambands.com together and to promote the book, and then turned it into an online magazine. The festival happened, although the show that the Biscuits were supposed to play in Michigan in '98, the first night of the festival happened, and I think Acoustic Hookah played. But then that night, a massive tornado came through and wiped out the power, and there was no festival the next day. And the Biscuits rolled in without knowing what was what, and we were like, "Sorry, park's closed. No music today." And they're like, but all right, let's hang out. And so Lesser and Brownie and I met and hung out for the day and salvaged the rest of the day. And then the first Biscuits set I actually saw was the following week in Cochran, Georgia. Great Magellan opener. And then they played the next week in State College at the Tussey Mountain Amphitheater. So my Biscuits experience was launched in through these festival sets, and then getting to know them by being kind of a volunteer on the festival and hanging out with them there, which was also coincidentally with all these other bands that were participating as well. It's sort of this myriad of community that was forming around the music.
So, Andy, by this point, I believe you already had your website, and it became gaydeal.com, but originally was associated with your university. It was something that I know I visited on a daily basis. I would wait in line at the campus computer lab, and when I would get a computer to whatever, type up my assignment or do some research, the first thing I would always do would be to go on to Andy's website to look at the latest Fish set lists, to look at what tour dates were happening, what tour dates were rumored to be happening. And also there was this section, at one point at least, it was called Friends of the Federation, where you had a very long list of text links. And it had everything from Agents of Good Roots to God Street Wine to Percy Hill to Rusted Root to the Jive Prophets and Jiggle the Handle. Every band that we would associate with this scene of jam bands. But as we just established, this concept was still kind of coalescing. So very lengthy way of getting to the question, which is, were you guys aware that something was happening, that a scene was starting to form, that there were commonalities between these bands, and that there was a culture or a community coming together?
I think the Horde, and I don't know if that tour was 91 or 92, that First Horde, but that was it. There was this big Rolling Stone article. It was like Fish was profiled in Rolling Stone, the hot jam for the thinking man. You know, I was like vindicated with all my non-Fish loving friends. Like, I told you this was going to be huge, you know, and that was 91, 92, that First Horde. And so it was a slow growth through the 90s. And one could argue that this growth was just put on steroids with the birth of the internet and the fact that people could get stuff. I spent a lot of time in the David Rittenhouse laboratory in college because that was where you got your math degree. But I majored in fucking internet tapes and trading tapes and going on Rec Music Fish and finding other nerds from other parts of the country. And you'd make your tapes and you'd trade your tapes, but you'd always, that set one was 72, 74 minutes. You had 16 minutes of filler. And that filler was always the band that you were hyping. I mean, that's how I learned about The Slip. Was getting filler on a Fish tape. And it was like, what is this? And you would set it up for these people. You know what I mean? You'd be chatting them on the early World Wide Web Rec Music Fish board, you know what I mean? And making these connections with people and their other university addresses and like making friends. You'd set up your floor, your crash spaces for where you were going to stay when you were going to see, you know, whatever band was coming to their school, and they were going to come and stay on your floor when Fish was playing the Spectrum in Philly.
Tape filler was the original word of mouth. Yes.
Right. Was the original wordofmouth.org.
The power to the people, or the Fish site was very big in the computer lab circuit because we didn't have home computers. It was, you know, I had a dial up from my dorm, but a lot of people didn't. And they went to the computer lab to check their email, to connect with their friends, because email really started rolling out in 94, 95, which just so happened to be when I was really getting into the scene, into the music space. I majored in computer science at Michigan State University, go Spartans, and they have a really good computer lab, really good modern system where I could save a file on my computer and you could look at it on another computer on the other side of the room or the other side of the world. And I knew how to turn on the computers so people would come to check their email, and I could help. I helped out. And the Fish site was originally just a hobby project. I mean, it still is, but it was just like, oh, I'm getting online and I'm able to publish because anyone can publish, and by saving your text here. And I was learning HTML, and it's just kind of off it went. But what really fueled it was people responding. I published my email address right there, and anyone who knew anything that they didn't see listed, they figured I didn't know, so they emailed me. And I got a couple emails from people with news or rumors and whatnot, and I was like, okay, I'll update the site. So then I stopped getting email for that day, and then the next day something new would get known somewhere. So I was rarely the first person to know, but often the second, and would just be this kind of conduit for information because I wanted to know and I wanted to share, and it was very much an altruistic, community building experience. The Friends of the Federation is very much a combination of my Star Trek nerdom along with my Fish nerdom, and it was a great combo. You know, Riker's Mailbox, came out, and I was like validated that Fish and Trekkies could live as one. But that list of bands that you named, which is still on there today, you can actually find it, was very much also fueled by the same premise of here's a list of bands I know from my experience that I've seen. If you know of these bands and know others that kind of fit the non-mold, like what is it that ties them all together? It's the community of fans that want to support them. They're not getting mainstream major label attention. It's very much an underground community is the theme that keeps coming back. And the growth of that list was all based on people saying, "Oh, you like them? You should check these guys out." And so, we were very intentional, and I could tell that there was a momentum and a mission and a swell of desire to promote and serve the underserved. These people, everyone knew about the big shows, but what about the one happening down the street? Or as I like to say today, I'm very much into unpopular music. By the time it's popular, they don't need me. But I was very, very into the whole sharing of information online and the revolution of the internet itself.
And that one to many, that you could put something up one time and you had many people getting it, right? That was sort of revolutionary. You used to make phone calls, or like you'd send someone's beeper or something. There just wasn't that ability. And you look at the bands in the Friends of the Federation. Yes, you have all the classic jam bands, but you also kind of brush up again. You got Bob Marley in there. You got Santana. You got stuff that your parents would know or hear of. You got very specific, but you have every sort of niche, every genre under the belt, and that's kind of where music's gone in the last 30 years, as you've transferred from being a fan of a band or maybe a scene, and now you have every song in the world at your fingertips, and you can be fans of songs, or the kids don't identify with genres these days because they don't have to. But when we wanted to get into something, we sort of dove into our little world there, and that was how we started and how we branched out.
It was like finding the others. Is like what I meant. Seth Godin often says is like it was a tribe, and there wasn't a way. The internet was emerging as this information superhighway where you could find out anything you ever wanted to know, but somebody had to put it there. And so it was still the early days of information. And so what I found was that me and my friends would go on, and the first thing we did was look up Fish lyrics. And we're like, "Oh, I didn't know that was the lyric," and this was evolved from AOL and hanging out with Mike Gordon in the Fishbowl, or Rec Music Fish, Rec Music GDead. And, these were groundbreaking new technologies that right place, right time, right age to embrace and take forward. And I remember seeing the first web browser and we're like, that's something. Let's see where this goes.
My experience was very similar. My arrival in college was fall of 1999. We had Ethernet ports in the dorm rooms.
Big.
There was a kid in my hallway who was a computer whiz, and he set me up with a web browser. And the first thing I did was go online looking for Grateful Dead lyrics and Grateful Dead images. And the history of internet technology is obviously one that has been accelerated and fostered by especially the Bay Area jam band community, something Jesse Jarnow has written on quite extensively, and others, the importance of the well, people like Steve Silberman, who established this precedent of sharing and communicating about improvisational music in an online forum. And that translated very nicely from the sort of pre-web Bay Area tech community to college campuses, on account of the fact that there were young people who had been exposed to the Dead during the band's MTV heyday in the Touch of Grape era. There was the ubiquity of high-speed internet and access to computer labs or personal computers. And all of these ingredients that came together during the mid to late 90s to establish the very fertile ground in which the two of you began to, and others, Dean Budnick you mentioned, many other people who were at this period taking advantage of these new communication formats and new technologies to not yet spread the music. We were still sending cassettes to one another in the mail, but to spread information and to create community.
Yes. And there was a feeling of, like manifest destiny, like taming the Wild West. Like we knew this could not, when it was happening, it was like, okay, the Ethernet in the dorm room, that was a big evolution. Going from dial-up to ISDN to and being able to not just and to load the pages faster. Right now we're chatting on video. It was a big revelation when Sugar Meg's audio came on, or Nugsnet originally came on, when Brad was taping shows and putting them online and sharing them for free. Like there's a direct line as you're talking about the growth of technology and the capability for people to connect and share information. And, I remember when I met Mountain Girl for the first time. It was like one of the original promoters of Grateful Dead acid test shows. And like one of the shows had to get switched and they ran down and changed the posters on the street pole, or they had their phone tree and they had to make their calls to let everybody know. Like, there's this sort of nature finds a way. And I think fandom finds a way. We were passionate fans fueled by our love for this music, and Ted and I embraced it and saw the potential for this technology to, dare I say, spread the jam. Really horrible, but I did it. Ted?
Well, you're just taking that from the headline of the San Francisco Chronicle Sunday date book that featured your and my faces on the cover, which
with
was
a color steal your face that every Deadhead's endorphins in the Bay Area went off when that was published in full color.
I just found that. I when we get up to do show and tell, Max, I'll bring that in as Exhibit A. I found that article.
So a lot of us, and in this period, were bit by the bug where you could keep expanding your community, your network. You could keep hearing new music. You could keep meeting new people to trade tapes with who, after you had already traded with all of the heads in your dorm or on your campus or in your town. Suddenly you ran out of tapes. There were no more tapes. But suddenly on the internet, you could be trading with people all over the country, all over the world. You're discovering new music. You're broadening your network. What made the two of you in this moment decide to go from just being enthusiastic participants in this culture to saying, we're going to now take this to a new level. We're going to actively become involved in shaping it and fostering it?
It's like that filler, right? We were talking about on your analogs, right? You're making these tapes. What I realized as I was turning people on, not only to the Sick Fish show that I saw last week, but I'm putting the choice 16 minutes that I curated. I was able to be a curator, and I knew it was a one-to-one. I'm just sending it to one person, but I knew that was the person of their campus who was doing what I did at Penn. Shout out to the PTA, the Penn Tapers Alliance, founded in 1993. I found a flyer for that recently as well, but we would get together and trade tapes, and like you had your campus network, but what you were saying, you could actually get it out there. And I think maybe the joy and excitement of like turning people on to new stuff, and also from where I was coming from in the employee benefits consulting world in 1998, meeting Andy and thinking about working in music and finding a foot in the door. I mean, we both knew the internet was the way in the door to the path that we wanted. We just had to figure out how we were going to weasel our way through that door. And who knows?
Just wanted to go to the shows. And I think I also... in my computer science evolution and learning about databases and something about relational databases and psychedelic improvisational music that went really well together. And our friend B. Hoss, who taught me about ODBC, relational access databases. And I remember actually in Suite G, the basement apartment of my brother's building, like learning about databases, like while the Biscuits were in town. Like it was all happening around the same time. And I have this affliction of like during the jams, during the songs, like figuring out, code. And I would like go back and be like really inspired by the music and listening to the music and like writing the scripts and figuring out how to make stuff work so that you could like click on a band and see all their dates, and then click on a venue and see all their dates. And like, oh my God, you can cross-reference this information all at once. So it's like the power of the web, but really the power of databases was growing and continues to grow. It's pretty amazing to think back at how far we've come.
So Andy, you're coming up in the Midwest. Ted, you're East Coast. How do you two cross paths, and how does this partnership form?
Aaron Trooper McHugh, fork or a spoon to finish your soup, introduced us as Ted moved to Chicago, I believe, to be the bartender at a Live One. Is that true?
A Live One. That is true. We have to credit this entire thing to David Halpern, who told me, you don't like your job doing suits and ties, working on databases for corporate America, do you? And I said, no. He said, you got to come out to a Live One. Because I had helped with the founding of a Live One, because the concept of a Live One was live music, but there was no live shows until we were there. And it was all about live music. So I curated live tapes, as we've been talking about, and then later live CDs. And we always tried to find shows from Chicago. And the philosophy of a Live One was like, well, when you're sitting at a bar, you're sitting at a table and you're music fans because you're at this live music bar, and on the table, next to the table is a rack of shows, tapes, CDs, whatever. And you see the show that you were at and you're like, what? We were there. And then you come up and you're like, could we hear that? And so Wednesday night was basically live bootleg night. And people would sit there and be like, all right, I got to hear this show. We were at that. It was me and him, my friends in town. We want to hear that. And it was that community that we talk about just sprang to life. That night, Wednesdays at a Live One, there was not a good night for business. But then we moved in and we built it up. It was word of mouth. And then it became the Slammin' Night of the Week. But it had to we had to find that community, but we knew we were there, right? And the internet sort of like, it continued to files, and we would go to shows, and because people knew who Andy was, and then they would see sort of the list, and you got to get to the flat file Perl database before we really combined the knowledge of of actually going with an Access database and then putting that on the web. But there were steps along the way, and it was really great to have the online community, the Fish page, the Jambase site, and then this sort of home base of a Live One. And it really coalesced right around, well, let's see, about 25 years ago tonight, actually, the Biscuits were in Chicago, I believe, playing, was it Martyrs on the 29th?
Martyrs, yes.
5/29. Got a flyer for that show by any chance, Andy?
There you go. Just happened to have that handy.
The tapes at a Live One was a big deal because the people would come and like do their tape trading there. It was a community spot. Like the bar was great, and then there were music posters everywhere, and there were tapes on the wall. There still to this day I think the Biscuits, there's definitely CDs on the wall at a Live One, and the infamous back room, which we'll get to. That it was a community hub. It was a spot for people who knew to go and hang out. And Ted was a great bartender and curator of music, playing all sorts of stuff that people hadn't heard of before, or by request.
Same philosophy, right? You're able to like tell people, and that natural passion, and it's us, it's our community. When you hear a version of a song that you're just like, you have got to hear, you know what I mean? The passion that we would deliver, the shit that we liked. Even if you've heard the same song that I've heard by the same band 100 times, I heard this version that you've got to hear, and like handing it to someone, you know what I mean? And I think that went on with a lot of people, obviously a lot of different genres, a lot of different places, but that feeling of like being the person, right? How many of you are that person for your friends where you tell them, you got to hear this band, you turn the people on to the band or to the version of the song, if you live in a very specific hyper niche world that we lived in, where you have to hear the 514-92 Fluffhead, the jam on that at the end is just sublime.
Flips over the guitar to the acoustic version, I think, at the end.
Oh, that was the Tower Theater 519.
Different. See, it's important to know the difference. I think the other part to this, the bands that we were really into were playing different shows every night. They were influenced and inspired by the Grateful Dead and Fish, but not copycats. And they were breaking new ground and pushing music into a new direction. And when the Biscuits came on the scene, and this concept of transfusion of really taking this emerging electronic music and combining it with the jam music, and it crystallized. It created, it was totally groundbreaking. Still is, but at the time we were totally hooked, and it was the perfect energetic fuel for the work that we were doing. And there's very clearly Jambase and the evolution of the work that was happening that was directly inspired and created and propelled to help support bands like that.
So help me clarify the timeline. When did Jambase come into existence? And was it from the start a collaborative project between the two of you?
Jambase came out of I was working on jambands.com for a year with Dean, doing publishing, helping pull the articles together, putting it on the website. But then there was this side project of the tour dates of where the bands were playing. And it always felt like that could have been its own thing, like just this database of concert dates. And so I spun that out and made it its own thing in March of '99. So it was actually right around the time that the Biscuits were in Chicago, before
Shubas.
Right around the Shubas time frame. So it was right near there. And I had been I remember brainstorming with BARBER and Mark and Aaron about it, just like being like, I have this idea of like creating this database of concert dates of where everybody's playing, and they're like, oh my god, that'd be so great to promote our shows. And I was like, yeah, well, let's do it. And so this was all happening around the same time, and it was thinking about it as like, could this be its own business, in the sense that a business is something that I could work on full time. And that's all we really wanted, was to work on it full time. And in order for us to work on it full time, it needed to be able to pay the rent. And that was kind of that was our goal, was just to be able to keep doing it.
And the one, I believe there was a stated goal of, let's do something where the bands would want us to go to the shows. There may have been a breakup with a girlfriend that said, when are you going to grow up and stop going to so many shows? And when I realized, like, when are they going to pay me to go to shows? How am I going to figure out how to go to shows for free? And that was pretty much all we wanted out of life. We were young. We didn't want for money or riches, fame. We didn't name our business something scalable that you could later sell for hundreds of millions. We just wanted to go to shows
and support the artists and embrace the community. And I think that still is the case. And it's this fandom that goes to the show, supports the artists, buys tickets, buys merch. And when we were starting, live music was not the way that artists were making a living. CDs were what people sold, and they would tour to promote the album. Now they make an album to promote the tour. It's completely different, or even if an album even exists. So it was always kind of an uphill fight to say live music matters. Like we're gonna really talk about, everyone was talking about recorded music for so long. But this concept of live music, and that these bands that are playing, you really got to see them live. Oh, I heard the album. You got to see them live. I mean, besides the Uncivilized Area, I-Man, which is the greatest recorded jam song of all time, the live versions, and so 98, the fall of 98 was important because the Biscuits played at the Wetlands on October 23rd, 98 for the jambands.com release party with the Slip in the lounge, and Oteil Burbridge and Beer for Dolphins, or Mike Keneally and Beer for Dolphins, Oteil and the Peacemakers, and the Disco Biscuits. And they played an incredible 2 sets in honor of the Jam Band's book release party, to bring it back to your question about that. And that was an incredible community convergence. I remember meeting Andy Bernstein there, and Dean, of course, was there, and Annabelle and Deanne was there. It's like, it was such an incredible night. And the Biscuits announced that night that they were playing 2 nights at the Wetlands on December 29th and December 30th, 1998. Mm-hmm. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm coming back to New York. And came back to New York and saw Fish at the Garden, and then the Biscuits, and then Fish at the Garden, and then the Biscuits. It was Fish, Biscuits, and then New Year's 98. What did we do, Max?
That was the big night. That was the big decision. That was the Sophie's choice for everyone in the community, because it was a foregone conclusion that you went to Madison Square Garden on New Year's Eve and you saw Fish. We all did it. I had been doing it for since 1995. I'm sure you guys were doing it for even longer at that point.
Same.
But the
95.
decision to not go to Madison Square Garden and to go to a diner in a bad neighborhood in Philadelphia that held, 75 people when the booths pushed out of the way, and to see the Disco Biscuits was a huge, huge, huge decision that many of us had to make. Andy, I know you. I know that Benji Eisen. I know that a lot of people who were there that night, that it was almost seen by their friends and community like this, even like a betrayal. You're going to see the Disco Biscuits instead of Fish? But for those of us who we were there, it was a life-altering experience.
My Fish friends thought I was crazy. They still do. And it was one of the best, musical career decisions I've ever made, because they debuted the Hot Air Balloon album in its entirety, or the Hot Air Balloon, rock opera. And it's not yet an album. It should be. And it was validating on many levels of our choice. And I was like, okay, we did the Fish thing. And it was, and I also at that time felt like my incredible passion for Fish, and of course for me with the association given the website, it was like breaking of some sort of unwritten rule. And I was like, I'm gonna go where my heart tells me to. And it was all signs were pointing towards there, and never look back.
It also made 348 people go see the Disco Biscuits, because they're like, if Andy the Fish guy is going to go see the Biscuits on New Year's, don't underestimate that choice changed. It's got people to see the band.
100%.
There are people that that I've met who met through the promotion of the Biscuits, or through the message boards and all that, who connected around the music, which is great. Your taste in music is such a personal thing, and it's what brings you joy, and to find others who share that joy and be able to connect them, I'm so grateful.
It felt incredibly validating to make that decision, and then to know people whose names were synonymous with Fish fandom, like Andy, like Benji, like Carla, had opted to be at Silk City that night. It made me feel, as a kind of junior member of the community, that I was onto something. I felt like I had found something that was about to change the entire scene, if not the world. And perhaps some of those feelings were hyperbolic, but at the time, it seemed like the most important place in the world to be was Silk City that night.
We majored in hyperbole in college, and Sickest Ever came out of that. Andy Bernstein introduced the band that night and said, people say the Disco Biscuits are full of hot air. Well, tonight they're going to prove it. It was an excellent joke that the tapes do not do justice. So that brings us to New Year's 98, Sickest.
Yes, Teddy has broken out his Sickest Ever t-shirt. Yes.
Well, I had the Ever, and it is somewhere in our world, but I don't have it with me now. But there is an Ever. Somewhere someone is wearing a shirt with the word Ever on the back of it and doesn't know why. But that's from Camp Bisco 99, which is after the show we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
So Biscuits, Hot Air Balloon, major statement, major news. The Biscuits debuted their rock opera on New Year's Eve. And then went on tour in and as we call it, the 9-9, Biscuits in the 9-9. They nasty but they good, relaxing with the Disco Biscuits. The 1999 was, I still think, the greatest year of Disco Biscuits that I've ever personally experienced. Some may argue and will of others, but that every show, there it is.
Yes. Disco Biscuits in the 9-9. I mean, they planted a flag. They essentially said 1999 is our year. And they, of course, had been playing the Prince 1999 song since May of 1998. They played it that New Year's Eve, but there was a real sense that the Biscuits were asserting themselves as the next band in line after Fish to really catalyze an evolution in the jam band scene. And I will say that when the band headed out on tour, many of us who were going online at our school computer lab to find out the latest dates were looking at a website created by Andy. So Andy, you were by this point working with the band in some capacity or another, helping them upgrade their website. There may have been a little flash animation, if I recall correctly. There definitely was a version of the hot air balloon playbill that you could look at home. But Andy, how did you come to begin collaborating with the band and helping them establish their digital presence?
That's a really good question. I stayed in Philly for a few days after New Year's 98 and stayed with the band, and got on their computer, and I remember updating their website. And you might know that our podcast originator host here, Mr. John the Barber Gutwillig, is a bit of a techie as well, and so he was very encouraging and inspiring, and could kind of ideate and brainstorm with the best of them. And so I remember Barber throwing out different ideas and thinking about what this new technology could be. We were working together around an idea to create a radio station. I believe it might have even been named Jam Radio, was the theory. It was like creating this whole enterprise of how could we, jam media between concert dates and news and radio. And so I was there, and I helped out, I volunteered, and I offered my services. And I, as a fan, wanted to see this stuff have a bit more meat and take advantage of the music and the visuals and the iconography, the hot air balloon. We put I can't find it now, but we put the playbill online, and all of the acts, all the songs on the Biscuits official website at the time. And I still remember that DB logo that was very futuristic looking. I feel like we should bring that back. So I was helping out, and it was kind of a hobby project and passion fan. I also felt like there's something about having seen Fish late. So I didn't start seeing Fish until 1995. I was a bit of a noob, but a quick study. And the first time I saw them was in amphitheaters. So I kind of missed out on the whole, like, oh my God, who are these guys? Like, by the time I saw them, it was like everybody already knew. And so to discover the Biscuits and to actually know them personally and meet them was a whole different level of kind of intimacy or connection with an artist, and helping them grow their career and helping them from this point of discovery and turning people onto them. And to be like, oh, if you like Fish, you might also like this other band. And so being able to use the platform that I had created to promote something new that I loved just flowed naturally.
So, Ted, having come up with Zexy, having been on campus with the band at Penn, you've been seeing them since they were still finding their footing. What was your take on what was going on with the Biscuits as 1998 turned into 1999 and the band was starting to pick up momentum?
Yeah, I mean, I can recall going to multiple parties with them playing Fish covers. You know what I mean? There was no doubt about the influences coming in, but there was also no doubt. I mean, I moved to New York after Philly, and there was plenty of Philly people up there. And so anytime something was, and there was, the support was there and the drive and determination was there. I mean, meeting any of them, but Brownstein's out in the lot making friends with people. He's literally pulling people on the bus one by one. People saw an incredible show, met the guy in the band, smoked a Nughofer, what else did you want? You're talking about coming up with a band. We would ask ourselves, what are the Dead doing after the show? What is Fish doing after the show? You weren't getting anywhere near them. I remember how life-changing it was. I saw Fish in Italy, and Mike Gordon just came out and walked around after the show. It was a small theater in Rome. February 97. And he was just hanging out. And it blew your mind that someone in the band that you revere, that you put up here on this pedestal, is hanging out with you. And the number of lives that these guys changed on the way, on that 99 tour, they were not going to be denied. They were not going to be stopped. They were going to get as close to the front of the line of who's next in line. And they play any show to do it. And in fact, leading up to the show, Andy reminded me the other day that the show that we're talking about here 25 years ago, the 31st, was really came together a lot because there were people that couldn't get into the show 2 days before because they had a, cadre of
martyrs.
Didn't have the, they were minors, I believe, and they couldn't get into the 21 plus. So I believe a live one was 21 plus too, but I don't know. They must have gotten
private party.
I wasn't on the door duty that day. I don't know what happened.
It was a private. We had food. We were serving food, so we were allowed to.
Yeah.
I think the connection that the band was making with their fans and inviting their friends in, and the band handing out flyers to people themselves. They were their own. It was such a great moment to meet them when they were self-starters and they were doing it all word of mouth, doing it all themselves.
As a super fan, isn't it your dream to be able to say, hey, what would be cool if you took that song and you split it into two and you put a different song in the middle, you know what I mean? And you could make these kind of suggestions, or wouldn't this end of this song go really cool into the beginning of that song? You know what I mean? And these things were coming together and they were out there and they were talking to people who love them, and this groundswell, right? It became this flywheel momentum of people loving them loving the people, them having the excitement, fueled by whatever it was fueled by. I don't know how he had all that energy back in the day, but it really became fewer kids.
I think you're onto something. I think Brownstein's enthusiasm and ambassadorship was one of the most important parts of the Disco Biscuits' early momentum. And thinking back, there's something interesting about the Biscuits being part of a third wave of jam bands. If the Dead were wave one and Fish and maybe some of the older, Max Creek, Ominous Sea Pods were, and the Horde bands were wave two. Mark came up as a fan of waves 1 and 2, as someone who knew those experiences, Teddy, you were describing intimately, knew what it was like to go on tour, to see shows, to live and breathe for a band. And I feel like so much of what the Biscuits became, they became the jam band for jam band fans. They became the meta jam band. Oh, the Grateful Dead played a palindrome set in 1974. Well, let's take that to another level. Let's rearrange and split the compositions in all sorts of new and novel ways that gesture back, but that do the things that you wish the Dead would have been doing, or that you wish Fish would have been doing. The Biscuits kind of took those jam band fan dreams and made them reality. Mm-hmm. And I think that I myself, in that period, that proximity, that lack of distance, Andy, you were talking about after the New Year's show, you stuck around in Philly for a few days. Well, famously, after the New Year's show, everybody went back to the band's house. The entire venue went to the band's house. And some people, I left the next day around noon or 1. The band drove me to the train station, but some people just stayed for days. And some people kind of never left.
2.5 minutes. It was 2.5 minutes. Yo, after the show tonight, everybody in the joint, you're all invited up to our house. We're having a little cast party, hot air balloon cast party. Because the party is surely not going to end at 2 o'clock. So, on the back of the hot air balloon flyers that we handed out at the door, there's directions from Silk City to our house in Upper Darby. It's about a 10-minute drive, nothing serious. Please be quiet when you're getting out of your cars and walk into our house, because it's a family neighborhood. So we're going to try and just keep it down, and then when we get in the house, we'll rage all night. So everybody's invited to our house. We're going to fucking all night. Yeah, I'm sorry. This is Rick. He is the party master, and he wants the party to go on for 3 days, folks.
That intimacy, that lack of distance, and also the fact that if you were around back then, you might be the lighting person. You might end up being the merch person. You might design a flyer. You might become the band's archivist. There was a role for everyone to play, and the band was more than willing and happy to say, sure, give it a try. Andy, try out a website. Ted, try doing the merch. Max, try doing the tapes and the archiving, because there was really nothing to lose back then. Only, risks that could be taken that might push the band a little bit further, expand the audience, expand the repertoire, expand the scene a little bit more.
So rare to see a band do that, invite their fans over, invite them in, right? And look, it gets to a level where you probably want to put a lid on that. But at the moment, there was no other, that was definitely happening. You guys all took a shot, turned your backs on Fish, went to Silk City on New Year's. They were going to treat to the best show ever with a brand new rock opera and invite you over and make you waffles the next morning. I mean, there is something in there that follows all of these stories, and that's the taking it to the next level, right? Like, this is a band that knew what the jam band train was about and needed to take it to the next level. Andy had a Fish page that had static blue links, and it was time to take that to the next level. You know what I mean? Even the Alive One story, right? Of like, we didn't know, you got linked with Dean, and he had a brand, he had a book, he had a thing that he was working on, right? We didn't really think about it until we got into the mix to realize, like, oh, we could have a brand. Alive One showed us, like, these are just my friends that started a bar, created a cool brand, and then everyone was buying their merchandise. And I was like, whoa, maybe it's that easy to start a brand. You know what I mean? And we went about it in a circuitous route, but that's kind of what Jambase became, and then realized that there was a way to take it to the next level. Our next level eventually became when we figured out how to make money, which was that was a couple of levels later.
Be able to keep doing it. Well, I think it was,
to figure out how to do it.
There's something threaded about Fish, not necessarily like breaking up with Fish as much as, like, we started seeing other bands. It's not you, it's me. But that, between myself and Dean, who wrote the Fish book prior, and Andy Bernstein, who wrote the Farmer's Almanac, we were all like, the diversity of music that we were then getting into. I don't think it was any diss on Fish as much as it was an embracing of the fact that they exposed us to all these musical genres that we would never have thought of before. So Fish is such a multi-dimensional band that it was natural for us to get turned on to new music and get inspired by other types of bands who were inspired by them. So I think it was a great wasn't an antithesis. It was an extension. It was continued evolution, and still is. I remember when we heard about Mike Gordon being at a Disco Biscuits show and how that freaked us out. Like, oh my God, these guys know each other, or like they know about this other band. Like when they met for the first time. So actually on May 29th, 1999, Humphreys McGee opened for the Disco Biscuits at Martyrs, and it was the first time that those bands actually met and have been friends for 25 years. And Brownie just sat in with Humphreys at what's now no longer summer camp, but in Chillicothe. So it's just like being there for that, not at the beginning, kind of in the middle, sort of, if 1965 started this whole mishigash, we were there 30 years later. But the intimacy and the sort of seeing a band play small rooms where I could tell that this music could fill larger rooms, and being able to be there in a room that wasn't full even. I remember I did a bit of the tour in February 99, and I remember being in the front row of Legends Lounge, this little bar in Vegas, and the band was just lights out, raging. And I was like, holy moly, like what is going on? This is a whole nother level, even beyond what we had seen at the end. Like they just kept the energy going. And that, kept us energized and kept us excited about what we were doing.
And there were 14 people there, if that.
At that Legends Lounge show?
At Legends, right? Yes, it was.
I definitely remember running around the room at one point, like during the Bernstein and Chasnoff, with like my hands up, like, oh my, and being able to run around the room with there being enough room, but just like, and I remember like, what is going on right now? Like, is this always how it is? Like, it still continued to blow us away night after night. And that, I think, being able to go back and see a band multiple times and having it blow you away, nothing better.
So you mentioned Humphreys, you mentioned the Biscuits tour through the Midwest at this period. To set the stage for the show that is ostensibly our focus through all of these detours, the performance at a live one on May 31st, 1999, I want to first establish what the Chicago jam band scene looked like in that time period. Humphreys is starting to come up. I believe they're still probably in South Bend at that point, or have they migrated to Chicago? You've got a live one, which is this community center for live music fans and tape trading. What else is going on in Chicago in this time frame?
There's something nurturing about that Midwest where, if you stop and ask somebody before you're going to get on the subway, like where you're going, nobody's going to talk to you unless you talk to like someone in uniform. In Chicago, my first day, I was trying to get to the bar from Gold Coast, from Halpern's Place, and I was going to take the bus, and I had no fucking idea. And I asked somebody, and 10 different people helped me. People were giving me maps. I was literally on the 22 bus going up Clark, and people would help you. You know what I mean? There was a niceness about it. And there's also the other thing about Chicago that I would call it the capital of the Midwest, because you would meet people and they'd be like, oh, I'm from Indiana, or oh, I'm from Michigan. You know what I mean? And they're like, oh, I'm Minnesota. And you would Chicago was the place that they would go. The same way we grew up in New Jersey, got out of school in Philly, and we're like, I'm going to New York City, like New York or bust. That's kind of how it was for Chicago. It was more attainable, and you could drive home to Iowa, Indiana. But you had your band where you were from. And so you had those South Benders that came back to Chicago and were all about Humphreys early. And you had the big woo heads, the Minnesota heads, you know what I mean? And you had all the different ones from all the different schools. Sorry, I can't remember your jam band of choice right now. Acoustic Hookah, for those of you in Columbus.
They were Ohio's finest. And there was a Midwest crew. There was a fandom of people that came out time and again, and they got really into the Biscuits. Yes. And really wanted to see the Biscuits, and were supporters and friends, and that kind of led us to what we're talking about, which is when they played at Martyrs, because it was 21 over, not everyone could go, and the band was heading up to Minnesota the next day for the Big Woo family reunion, and we had the bright idea. I don't actually remember when we came up with the idea and actually confirmed it, but we said, why don't you play a live one on your way back to the East Coast? And Ted worked it out with the bar, and I rented a PA from the Guitar Center down the street, which I'd never done before, and I don't remember doing since.
I thought we bought the PA and then went back and returned it.
Oh, you know what? You're right. We might have done that. Like, what's the return policy on this thing?
Yeah, it was a 30-day. Just don't mess it up. We put it in the back. We didn't actually know what a PA was at that point. We weren't sure. Like,
it was for the vocals because they played out of their amps, and Lesser, who I talked to earlier, said, there was no soundboard. So he actually danced more that show than he's ever danced at a show that he worked, which was exciting to see. But I think we spread the word all through email and word of mouth. And it was, if you know, you know, and it was a total private party, but anyone who wanted to go, the
room held open. Like 60 people jammed. You know what I mean? It was not a large room. It was literally a back room. And when Andy says I worked it out to get us the thing, I knew that both owners were at the weekend. Wow. That's how we worked it out, because I knew that no one was going to come, and I knew that they had mops and whatever, Sure,
and now they do music. It was groundbreaking, because now they do music there more often, but they had never really done music in the back room. Turns out it's a great place for a party.
It was a throwdown.
So it was Memorial Day weekend, and this was the band's second swing through the Midwest since the start of the year. In March, the band had played a string of now legendary shows: Minneapolis, 2 nights in Madison, Chicago at Shuba's, Cicero's in St. Louis, up to East Lansing, Ann Arbor, Blind Pig, and finished the tour at Graffiti's in Pittsburgh. And barely 2 months later, in May, the band is back for a shorter swing. They started out in Columbus, back to St. Louis, the aforementioned Martyrs show on the 29th, and the tour was scheduled to end at the Big Woo Festival in Minneapolis on May 30th, before heading back east for the jambands.com shows at the Wrecker and the Wetlands on June 3rd and 5th. Correct. So what I want to know is just how impromptu, how last minute was this planning? Was this planned between Martyrs and the 31st? Was this planned a month before? Give me the timeline of when you guys got this harebrained idea to book the Biscuits to play the back room at a live one.
Was it like the night of the Martyr show, and they're like, people can't get in, and the band was like part of the idea? They're fans. They are fans too. And so I don't have an exact recollection. I never remember how I get to shows, because the show itself sort of takes up all the memories. But I don't think this was planned very much more than the day before.
Yeah, no more than 2 days before. On that 529, when people couldn't get in, I think Andy's recollection is correct, because we went and got the PA on the 5:30 on the day before, or day of. Like, we were.
It was the day of.
It was day of. I remember you wheeling it down the street, and we're like kind of waiting for them to arrive for load in and the whole thing. But yeah, there was definitely. I remember that now, because it was a Monday. I mean, look, that was the end of Memorial Day weekend, right? Nobody does the Monday show on Memorial Day. Like, the Sunday is the blowout.
The Guitar Center is still there, right down the street from
Halstead?
A live one on Halstead. Yeah, I'm looking at the map right now, and it's right on the same block. Like, props to that Guitar Center for being.
This show doesn't happen if it's not on the same block. We're wheeling it down the street. You know what I mean? We would have not. We didn't even know what a PA was. Thank God, there's a Guitar Center on the block, and we're like, oh yeah, we could get a PA. Let's walk down the street.
We had a lot of help. There were some great local fans that chipped in, that helped us I remember Sarah Martin was there. I remember the whole Midwest crew, all the friends, Freed and the kids that were all there at the beginning were really embracing it. Our taper friends, Nick Colovolis, our buddy Mike Hirsch, there was all these great people that were just fans of the Biscuits. And this special event was like, the band was like, yeah, let's do something great for the Midwest fans that want to keep coming to see us. Who doesn't like the people who like you? And they embraced it, and they played a hell of a show. It got off to it started a little, we got the Wet and the Spaga and the Radiator Barfly, good Barfly for being in a bar. But then that second half of that show, the Memphis Dribble. Strap in. It's a rock.
Single disc. It's a single discer.
I'm still setting the stage, at least for myself, because one thing that occurred to me is the conditions were so ripe for the Biscuits in this period, especially in the Midwest. And, you were referring to Sarah Martin, Dan Freed, the very strong Chicago and Midwest Phish community. It dawned on me that 1999, how many shows did Phish play before July 1st?
You know the answer. Yes.
Phish basically took the first half of 1999 off. And the Biscuits capitalized on that opportunity. And as Biscuits tour worked its way out west in January, February, and then back east in March, with every passing gig, they picked up more and more of the core Phish fans. And those people became the core Biscuits tour community. People like Polly Heron, these people who were very much associated with the Page Side people. Was that what they were? The PSPs, the Page Side posse.
Yeah,
they became the BSP. Dave Clarko, obviously a collaborator with the Biscuits, but a longtime friend. A journalist, commentator, but people were kind of bringing the Phish community to the Biscuits. The Biscuits were picking up and attracting a lot of the energy and excitement that was looking for an outlet with Phish off the road.
It's a great point I never thought of, was that Phish did not really play a public show until June 30th in Bonner Springs, 99. The two shows before that were like the Flynn Theater, which isn't even really a real show. It's just a little thing. And then they played the Barn, which nobody went to. So yeah, they didn't play the first half of 99. And there's when Phish takes a break, it leaves room for the vacuum, nature abhors, it gets filled. And the Biscuits, right time, right place, completely and utterly came in and swept us off our feet.
The other thing I want to say is, going back to that Martyr show and all of the under 21s not being able to get in, that would have been people like Mitesh, that I don't know if Ben Kartzman, Ted's younger brother, and Mark Goldieman, the crew of kids from Carnegie Mellon, a lot of the core Biscuits fan base was 19, 20, 21 at that point.
Yep.
And the experience of not getting into a show was, I think, formative for many people who would end up becoming instrumental parts of the Biscuits community, myself included. My first Biscuits show, we couldn't get in because I was 21 and my girlfriend was 20 and 11 months. They wouldn't let her in. And so rather than leaving, we stayed and danced in the street outside of the front of the venue. At set break, Brownstein came out. We smoked a blunt together. We stayed through the entire show, and we left having this connection. We left having made this bond over the fact that we were the crazy ones who, despite not being able to get in, didn't leave. And so many of the shows, so many of the stories from the 99 tour have a moment of Sammy stuffing someone into a road case and carrying the road case in, or sneaking people in through the window at the bathroom in the backstage green room, or someone pretending they were Brownstein's girlfriend, or you're going to sell merch this show. You're under 21, but you're our merch person now, so you're part of the crew. the band would go out of their way to try to make sure that every single fan got in. Martyrs was, from my understanding, like a hardcore club where they were no nonsense. They were not going to abide by any hippie BS. And so a lot of those people got shut out. And how wonderful is it that you and the band in that moment, rather than just saying, oh, that's too bad, let's just play the show and enjoy ourselves, you thought, well, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way that we can remedy this and that we can have a show that everyone who wants to be there and who needs to be there can be at.
There were people dancing on the street because you can see in the front window of Martyrs. I now remember that, like, we went out during set break and like, oh, sorry you couldn't get in, but we're going to do a show at a live one, we think. Everyone was like, oh, they're going to, like, it was for the people that couldn't get in. And even Mark says that. I gave the intro that I listened to today to the Alive One show, and I said something about Martyrs, and Mark corrected me. He's like, and for those that couldn't get in. And that was very much what that Alive One show was also about.
On behalf of Ted Cartsman and Sarah Martin, the two greatest people in the world right now, for putting this together. We all went to Martyrs and had a great time, and we invited them back here for you today.
On behalf of all those people who didn't go to Martyrs, more importantly. Or couldn't go to Martyrs.
Ladies and gentlemen, Disco Biscuits!
I don't know if the Pittsburgh crew was there. I know they were there in March at Madison at the Rosskeller. We went up and then at Shuba's, but it's a little bit of a blur exactly the Martyrs and a Live One attendance.
But we had a good crew, like the Evanston crew. There's a bunch of Northwesterners, right?
That was what the after party was, right?
Kevin and you had Billy and John Green, and people were, I felt like it wasn't one of those things, you know, like you go to a small show now and it's like, how do I get tickets? Who's got tickets? Like tickets, we just, like, people showed up. Maybe we charged $10. I don't know. Maybe we charged $20. I don't even really
know. You had a
know.
list. I think it might've been one bill. I remember it was only one bill was the to get in.
But it wasn't
just
like
to cover
that kind of thing, right?
Renting the PA.
Right. It was more collaboration, right? It was more like, let's get this done. Let's get the people in than hey, I got to get it. You know, I got to get two people in. And it was like, oh, if they deserve to get in, they're getting in. You know what I mean? And we didn't really sweat it. We also were sort of trying to make it happen, and we're like in charge of the club. And I don't know. There were corners may have been cut. I think the statute of limitations expires Friday on any
25 years later.
25 years.
You can take credit for all the good that came of it. But it was one of those, if you wanted to be there, and then you could be there. And it for those that got treated to a special show that was very indicative of what the Biscuits were doing in 1999. There's a moment during the second half of the show where the audience starts like barking at the band, like, yes. Like, I don't know if it's barking as much as like just like the crowd interaction. We were all on the same playing field. You know, there was no separation between the band and the fans, and that was very validating. And just the interaction between the audience and the band that night was in full force.
I actually have a few contemporaneous accounts that I'd like to share with everyone, you two included. This one is from Ben Silver, who has gone on to become a very accomplished DJ with the Orchard Lounge DJ Collective, who's played many a Camp Bisco and collaborated with the band and with many other very noteworthy electronic music producers. Ben wrote at the time on the band's email mailing list, Discuss Biscuits. The room was probably 3 times the size of my bedroom. It was so small. There was a bar in the back, and the back left corner was dedicated to taping. There were only about 60 or 70 people there, and everyone was going nuts. It was cool because everyone was in their own little world.
True.
Ryan Sistina wrote, the whole room was passing around pitchers of water. Everyone was drinking straight out of the pitcher and then passing it on. A few women and Tom C., one of the original tapers, were dancing half naked. Group hugs throughout, and generally everyone dancing as if there were no tomorrow.
That's true. And during the Memphis, there was some half-naked dancing as well.
Chris Woody.
Yeah, I saw him in Tahoe. Yeah.
Who has been a part of the Biscuits community for at least 25 years and who's a fixture on tour these days. He said that the topless women in the front row were better known as the Spice Girl Posse. This was a planned event for the Memphis, and the nudity was the motivation for the best Memphis I've ever heard or seen.
Confirmed.
And then Andy, you yourself wrote that the Biscuits once again showed everyone that they could take it to the next level in a way that no one else knows how, and no one can comprehend how they reach the magnitude of explosion which carries them and the audience through the night. People were dancing. No, wait. They were raging, jumping up and down, screaming and yelling. It was high energy, intense jamming, and worldly evolution of rock and roll collisions. It was a rock concert. It was huge.
What the?
You wrote that.
I stand by those words. Sitting here today, it was validating and it was a great show.
So you mentioned that the band was playing through their amps, and then you had a PA for their vocals. But one great moment along the lines of what you, Teddy, were talking about a moment ago, that the band's sound engineer, John Lesser, had nothing to do, no room to mix, no soundboard. At the part of Mindless Dribble, when the vocals are usually drenched in reverb and are echoing through the hall, well, there was no soundboard to process those vocals. So it seems like from the tape that Lesser was given a microphone and essentially using his own voice tried to echo the band singing to create the effect. And it really just sounds like almost like a hardcore show or a punk show where someone's screaming into the mic and it's overloading and distorting. It's just such a great moment to hear John Lesser being liberated from his perch behind the soundboard and being able to make his contribution, one of his signature contributions, which was the vocal distortion on Mindless Dribble, but doing it in such a unique way where you could tell he was just having the time of his life.
That's so great. You brought that up because I now remember that. I definitely remember dancing with John and being so thrilled that he was having as much fun as we were. And he dances at the soundboard, but he's told me he could use his arms now, use his hands. Yeah, we were all in it, and they went for it. They took it to where we wanted to go. It hit the spot. They did it. They did it proper.
Well, and I think after that Barfly, you were saying like there was a level up, right? Because you had the Memphis Challenge, where if there was partial nudity, there would be the Sickest Memphis Ever. And it was like, all right, let's see what you got. You know what I mean? And that's like a single disc, right? Memphis, Mindless Drivel, and then Basilio's Mr. Don, Run Like Hell, right? That was a moment, and the energy there that was created, and everybody was contributing in whatever way they could. There was sweat dripping from the ceiling by the end of that 5-song sort of medley mayhem, easily an hour and a half. I don't know if I'm being hyperbolous as well, but that took it to the next level. That's really what this whole thing was about. Could we do a show? Could they do a show? Could we get the underage is in? Could we like pull this off? Could we rent a PA? It was like, well, this is where we're at. We're about to hit the back half of the 9-9. We are taking it to the next level. We are launching Jambase. We are going global. We are moving to San Francisco. We are taking it to the next level. And as did the Biscuits, right? They started the year playing fucking Shubas, was what, 300 people? What happened after the Alive one? Did they come back and play Park West in September? Like,
you know it.
Right? So they went 300 to 900. They did the work. And that's what it takes. You got to get out there and play those shows. And they saw that opportunity at the top of 99, and they saw Fish not doing it. And I don't know if they planned to tour from the beginning February through that May and then hit it again, but they fucking did it. And they knew that there was a rainbow at the end of the pot of gold, at the end of the rainbow, if they could not break the band up and stay together, because there was a lot of intensity. And
Stay tuned for the next episode. That's a different episode of a different podcast. This night, everything
was all bliss.
This ended on a very happy note. From Nick Kolovos's account, after the show, everyone hung out and a dance party started in the parking lot. It was really cool meeting all the Biscuits crews from all over the country. Everyone was really beautiful and loving. What a blast meeting all these wonderful people and sharing this great feeling. So you really did create a special experience for people in a year full of special shows, many of which, I continue to hold very dearly to my heart. Shows in strange venues, shows with strange people, shows where you actually watch the band evolve their sound in real time on stage. This is one that stands out, and the 60 or 70 people who were there still talk about this as one of the most important and special and indelible musical memories that they have. So first and foremost, thank you to the two of you for being crazy enough to have this idea and then to actually follow through with it.
It's an honor and a privilege. Or to quote my friend John Gutwillig, thank you, I accept your praise.
With the benefit of hindsight of being able to look back, and Andy thinking of those early festival gigs that you were working, Ted thinking of stumbling upon this band rehearsing on campus, what's it like to see them today?
I was really, as I was saying to you earlier, I was really blown away by the shows we saw earlier this year in Tahoe and Fillmore. I love seeing them in their element, watching them work. When they're on, they're so good. This is like the best at what they do, the only ones who do what they do in many respects. It's, in some regard, it's very different for me. I think I've changed quite a bit. I don't know. They've changed and evolved in different ways. It's these days it's all gas. Like it's a journey. Like you go in and you're going. And I listened back to a lot of the stuff before, and it was a journey then too, just at different layers and different levels of intricacy. And so I love it. I'm a huge fan and appreciator of the music and of getting an opportunity to work with them personally. And for me, it's multidimensional, working with Barber on Couch Tour, working with Mark on Lively, getting to be part of their creative process on different side project endeavors, but then coming back and watching them in the Disco Biscuits, which is where they do their greatest work, it's a thrill. And I'm psyched that they are out there making music and continuing to blow people's minds.
that they've been able to evolve through the things that are reality. Like 99 wasn't reality. There were no kids. There was just getting to the next thing, doing more. We were all figuring out how to take it to the next level. Now you got your levels are like kids related stuff, full families, you have multiple schedules with people that have other things going on, and like to find a way to continue to prioritize this, to continue to evolve while doing it, because no band is happy when they're stagnant and they're just playing the hits from yesterday. And that's not this band, and that's not this scene, right? To continue to evolve, to have the classics, to have the new stuff, to play the old stuff in new ways, to play new stuff that, continues to like further characters or scenes from other songs. I always love even just like back to the hot air balloon, like things that this was Dead and Fish and all the bands maybe you like, right? That there were little morsels that they would leave, and there were clues from different songs, and they would relate in different ways. And you were like, if you were smart and you were picking up on it, you know what I mean? Like they were taking that to the next level by breaking the song apart and inverting it. And there's just, look, you can only go so fast, so hard when you're all gas all the time, unless it's in its container. And when you get into that Biscuits mode, you could do what you do. And I hope that they continue to do it. I hope they continue to love it and continue to bring the joy to people and also evolve while doing it. I don't know. I never thought the band that I heard like practicing that Antelope cover in the back
you were
of
there
bass block. Like I never thought it, you know what I mean? And all the things that you thought were like, it's over. Like Sammy Altman's gone, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, that was a good run, you know what I mean? Or like they break up one of the 10 times and you're like, well, I guess that was a good run. But like when something is destined to be, it is.
Well, and one of the best parts about all of this for me is that I go to shows and I see people with whom I've had these multiple decades long relationships. I see you guys, I see Benji, I see Andy Bernstein, I see Carla, I see Trooper, that a lot of us are still here and are still united by a form of that same excitement that we experienced back in 1998 that had us making the trip to Philadelphia instead of going to MSG, that had us going out to Las Vegas to see a band play in front of a few dozen people in a bar way off the strip, to make crazy decisions like to try to put on a show in the back room of the bar that we work in. So the fact that 30 years on, a whole generation of people who've never known a period where you can't stream every Biscuits show live, where there's not a pristine soundboard waiting to be downloaded the next morning when you wake up. It's an amazing thing to kind of carry on that excitement, that passion, and for us all to be able to collaborate and express it in ways that continue to do the things that most excited us back then, which were to build community around music. And so, Andy, Ted, thank you so much for taking time out to come on Touchdowns All Day. And again, thank you for really catalyzing, doing so much to set in motion a scene that to this day is strong and healthy and continues to bring people together.
Thanks, Max.
Thank you, Max. Thank you for continuing it and the work you're doing to, remind us of how good it is and to keep pushing it forward, sharing it with everyone. That's the beautiful thing about music, is you can share it and then you still have it and more people have it and you can enjoy it together.
Thanks again to Ted and Andy for joining us on Touchdowns All Day. And thanks to all of you for listening, for leaving those 5-star iTunes reviews, and for sharing an episode with a friend. It's a great way to spread the word about the podcast and everything that's going on here in the bubble of positivity. Like I said at the head of the episode, we would love to hear your stories for a future installment of this segment, I Remember When. So reach out, hit us up, 424-666 SIYD, or get us on the socials at Touchdowns All Day, at FY Maxwell, at Barber Shreds. Touchdowns All Day is an Osiris Media production. This episode was written, produced, and edited by me, Max Dawson, with help from Matt Dwyer. Special thanks to Alex Wolf and Ryonix for helping me track down the I Remember When studio cut. Check us out at www.touchdownsallday.com and use the hashtag TouchdownsAllDay on all social platforms. Special thanks to Mark, John, Aaron, Allen, Disco Biscuits, Ben Baruch, and Andrew Kaplan at 1111 Management, the entire Disco Biscuits road crew, Joey Friedman and Steve Martocci, the Touchdowns All Day Advisory Committee, that's Andy Bazzani and Mike Walsh, the Biscuits Internet Project, Russ Tabes, Dave Cook, Scott McClintock of Think Tank Dubs, Rich Steele, and Ian Armstrong. Last but not least, extra special thanks to Lisa Gutwillig, Deb Brownstein, Angelica Magner, Sandra O'Quinn, Andrea Rivers, and Avery McMahon. On behalf of John Barber and the entire Touchdowns All Day family, this is Max Dawson saying, see you next time.
We're mass communicating. We're mass communicating. We're mass communicating.
Osiris.